My name is Tracy Gibson. I'm 32 years old, and for 6 years I had been secretly paying the $4,200 monthly mortgage on my father Richard's $950,000 house, sacrificing my own financial dreams and living in a cramped studio apartment while working overtime shifts to keep him comfortable in his retirement, all while he believed his mortgage was somehow automatically managed and never suspected his daughter was the anonymous savior preserving his dignity and security. What my father didn't know was that his cruel assessment of me as a complete disappointment and waste of space, who he wished had never existed, was about to cost him everything I had been quietly providing. Because the house he thought was his sanctuary was actually legally mine, and his venomous words were about to trigger the most devastating lesson about gratitude and consequences that he could never have imagined. The secret financial sacrifice that had defined my adult life began 6 years earlier when my father Richard lost his engineering job at 58 and faced the devastating reality that his pension wouldn't cover the mortgage payments on the beautiful suburban home where he and my mother Margaret had planned to spend their retirement years in comfort and dignity. I had watched my proud, accomplished father struggle with unemployment applications, age discrimination, and the slow destruction of his self-worth as months passed without job offers that would allow him to maintain the lifestyle and financial security he had worked decades to achieve. The house represented more than just shelter. It was his proof of professional success, his source of pride, and the foundation of his identity as a provider and responsible family man. "I don't know what we're going to do about the mortgage," he had confided to my mother during a conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear. "The pension covers our basic expenses, but we're still $4,200 short every month for the house payment. At my age, no one wants to hire an engineer who's almost 60 years old." The desperation in his voice had broken my heart, especially because I knew how much the house meant to him, and how devastating it would be for his pride and mental health to lose the home where he had expected to live out his retirement in dignity and comfort. He had worked so hard throughout my childhood, often missing family events and personal milestones to build the career and financial security that should have supported him through his golden years. As a successful software engineer earning a substantial salary at a tech company, I had the financial capability to help with the mortgage payments, but I also understood that my father's pride would never allow him to accept direct financial assistance from his daughter. He had always been the provider, the problem solver, the one who took care of everyone else's needs, and asking for help would have felt like admitting failure and dependence that would destroy his sense of self-worth. That's when I developed the plan that would secretly preserve his dignity, while ensuring he could keep the home he loved. Instead of offering direct financial assistance that would wound his pride, I would anonymously take over the mortgage payments while allowing him to believe that some administrative solution or pension adjustment had resolved his financial crisis. Working with the mortgage company, I arranged to have the monthly payments automatically transferred from my account, while the mortgage statements were redirected to a P.O. box I established specifically for this purpose. Richard would continue receiving correspondence that showed his mortgage as current and properly managed, but he would never see the actual payment processing details that would reveal my involvement. "Mr. Gibson, there seems to have been some kind of administrative adjustment to your mortgage account," I had the mortgage company representative tell him during a carefully orchestrated phone call. "Your payments are now being processed automatically through a pension management program. You should continue to budget for the mortgage expense, but the actual payment processing will be handled administratively." The relief in my father's voice when he told my mother about this administrative solution had validated every aspect of my decision to preserve his dignity while secretly ensuring his financial security. He believed that some bureaucratic process had solved his mortgage problem, allowing him to maintain his pride while keeping the home that meant everything to him. For 6 years, I had faithfully made those $4,200 monthly payments, totaling over $300,000 of my own money that I could have used for my own home down payment, investment portfolio, or the comfortable lifestyle that my software engineering salary should have provided. Instead, I lived in a 400-square-foot studio apartment, worked overtime whenever possible, and carefully budgeted every expense to ensure I could continue covering my father's mortgage while maintaining my own basic living standards. The financial sacrifice had been substantial but manageable because I loved my father and believed that family members should support each other during difficult times, especially when that support could be provided without damaging pride or creating feelings of dependence and obligation. I had convinced myself that my anonymous generosity was the highest form of family love, selfless support that allowed him to maintain his dignity while ensuring his security and happiness. My father had thrived during these 6 years of secret financial support, hosting family gatherings in his beautiful home, maintaining his pride as a successful retiree, and enjoying the comfortable lifestyle that my mortgage payments had made possible. He had no idea that his daughter was working extra hours and living in cramped conditions to preserve his quality of life and financial peace of mind. The house had become the center of family celebrations, holiday gatherings, and social events, where Richard could play the role of gracious host while maintaining his image as someone who had successfully planned for retirement and achieved financial independence. His neighbors and extended family members praised his wise financial management and his ability to maintain such a beautiful home during his retirement years. But everything changed during a phone conversation that would shatter my understanding of how my father truly viewed me and reveal that my years of anonymous sacrifice had been supporting someone who harbored deep contempt for my existence, while never suspecting that his comfortable life depended entirely on my generosity and love. Have you ever sacrificed your own financial dreams to secretly support someone you loved, only to discover that they viewed you with contempt and wished you had never been born? That's exactly what I was about to experience when a simple technology malfunction would expose my father's true feelings and transform my anonymous generosity into the foundation for the most devastating lesson about gratitude and consequences that he would ever receive. The phone call that would destroy my relationship with my father forever began as a routine conversation about family holiday plans, but it ended with me overhearing the most heartbreaking assessment of my worth and existence that would fundamentally change how I viewed my 6 years of secret financial sacrifice and anonymous love. I had called my parents to discuss Thanksgiving arrangements and to confirm whether they wanted me to bring my usual contribution to the family dinner that would be hosted, as always, in the beautiful home that I had been secretly preserving for their comfort and enjoyment through my monthly mortgage payments. "Hi, Dad. I wanted to check about Thanksgiving plans and see what I should bring this year," I had said when Richard answered the phone, expecting the usual discussion about menu coordination and timing that characterized our holiday planning conversations. "Just bring whatever you think is appropriate, Tracy," Richard had replied with the somewhat dismissive tone that had become increasingly common in his interactions with me over the past few years. "Your mother has most of the meal planned already, so just pick up something simple from the store." The conversation had been brief and unremarkable, covering the basic logistics of family gathering coordination without any of the warmth or enthusiasm that I had hoped to hear in my father's voice. When he said goodbye and supposedly hung up the phone, I had assumed our conversation was complete and had started to end the call myself. But a technical glitch with either his phone system or the connection had left the line open without Richard realizing that I could still hear everything happening in his house, creating an accidental party line that would allow me to overhear conversations that he never intended for me to witness. I was about to hang up when I heard my father's voice continuing to talk, apparently believing that he had successfully ended our conversation and was now speaking privately to my mother, Margaret, about their Thanksgiving plans and family dynamics. "Thank God that conversation is over," Richard said to my mother, his voice carrying the kind of relief and irritation that people express when they've finished dealing with something unpleasant. "I swear, talking to Tracy is always such a chore. She never has anything interesting to say, and she always sounds so needy and desperate for approval." The casual cruelty of his assessment hit me like a physical blow, but I remained silent on the open line, hoping that his comments were just momentary frustration rather than his genuine feelings about our relationship and my place in his life. But what followed was so much worse than momentary irritation. It was a comprehensive character assassination that revealed my father's complete contempt for my existence and his genuine wish that I had never been born into his family. "She's absolutely worthless, Margaret," Richard continued, his voice filled with disgust and contempt that made it clear these weren't passing thoughts, but deeply held beliefs about my value as a person. A complete disappointment in every possible way. I honestly wish she had never existed. What a complete waste of space. The words hit me with such devastating force that I initially couldn't process what I was hearing. My father, the man whose mortgage I had been paying for 6 years, whose comfortable retirement I had been secretly funding, whose dignity and pride I had been preserving through my anonymous sacrifice, was expressing pure hatred for my existence, while never suspecting that his roof over his head depended entirely on my love and generosity. "She's 32 years old and has accomplished absolutely nothing meaningful with her life," Richard continued his brutal assessment, apparently warming to his topic as he detailed every aspect of my supposed failures and inadequacies. "She has a decent job, I suppose, but she lives in that pathetic little apartment and never seems to have any money or ambition to improve her situation. She's just mediocre in every possible way." The irony of his criticism about my living situation and apparent lack of money was so profound that it took my breath away. I was living in a pathetic little apartment and appeared to have no money precisely because I was spending $50,400 every year to ensure that he could live comfortably in his beautiful home without any financial stress or worry about mortgage payments. "And she's so awkward and boring at family gatherings," Richard continued, clearly enjoying the opportunity to voice complaints about me that he had apparently been harboring for years. "She never contributes anything interesting to conversations. She doesn't seem to have any real friends or relationships, and she just sits there looking uncomfortable and out of place. Sometimes I wonder what we did wrong in raising her." My mother's response to this character assassination was almost as devastating as Richard's original comments. Because instead of defending me or expressing any affection for her daughter, she seemed to be agreeing with his harsh assessment of my worth and place in their lives. "She has always been a bit odd, hasn't she?" Margaret replied, apparently comfortable participating in this discussion of my supposed deficiencies and failures. "I used to hope she would grow out of it and become more social and successful, but it seems like she's just going to remain mediocre forever." The casual way my mother agreed with my father's brutal assessment made it clear that these weren't isolated thoughts but rather ongoing family discussions about how disappointed they were in their daughter and how much of a burden or embarrassment they considered me to be. "The worst part is how she acts like she's doing us some kind of favor by showing up to family events," Richard continued, his voice becoming more animated as he detailed his resentments and frustrations. "She contributes nothing, brings the cheapest possible food items, and then sits there expecting us to be grateful for her presence. It's honestly pathetic." The accusation that I contributed nothing to family events while sitting in the home that I was secretly paying for was so ironic that I almost laughed, despite the devastating pain of overhearing my parents' true feelings about my existence and value as their daughter. "I've been telling people that she's selfish and never helps with anything," Richard continued, revealing that he had been actively damaging my reputation with extended family members, while never suspecting that I was providing the financial foundation for his entire comfortable lifestyle. "She could certainly afford to be more generous considering her salary," Margaret added, apparently unaware that my software engineering income was being largely consumed by their mortgage payments, rather than being available for the kind of generous gift-giving or lifestyle upgrades they expected to see from their successful daughter. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with my parents detailing every aspect of their disappointment in me while expressing genuine regret that I was their daughter, and genuine wishes that I had never been born into their family. When Richard finally discovered that the phone line was still connected and hurriedly hung up, ending the accidental party line that had allowed me to overhear their true feelings, I sat in my small apartment staring at the phone while processing the most devastating betrayal imaginable from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Have you ever discovered that the people you've been secretly supporting through enormous personal sacrifice actually despise your existence and wish you had never been born? That's exactly what I had just experienced. And it was exactly what would transform my anonymous generosity into the foundation for their education about gratitude, consequences, and the true meaning of family support. My father's comfortable retirement lifestyle was about to become much less comfortable when he learned what life looked like without the support of the daughter he wished had never existed. The days following my accidental discovery of my parents' true feelings about my existence were marked by a profound shift in my understanding of family relationships, personal worth, and the devastating irony of providing anonymous support to people who despised me, while never suspecting that their comfortable lives depended entirely on my sacrifice and generosity. The emotional impact of overhearing my father describe me as absolutely worthless and a complete disappointment, while expressing genuine wishes that I had never existed, was devastating enough on its own. But the cruel irony that these sentiments were being expressed in the home I had been secretly paying for made the betrayal even more profound and heartbreaking. I spent the weekend reviewing 6 years of financial records that documented my sacrifice, calculating that I had paid exactly $302,400 toward my father's mortgage while living in increasingly cramped conditions and forgoing the lifestyle improvements that my software engineering salary should have provided. Every month for 72 consecutive months, I had prioritized his comfort and dignity over my own financial goals and personal happiness. The mortgage payment history revealed that I had never missed a single payment, never been late, and had even occasionally paid extra toward the principal balance when I received bonuses or overtime compensation. My dedication to preserving my father's security had been absolute and unwavering, motivated by love and family loyalty that I had believed was reciprocated and appreciated. But now I understood that my anonymous generosity had been supporting someone who viewed me with contempt while taking credit for financial management skills that existed only because of my secret intervention. Richard had been accepting praise from neighbors and family members for his successful retirement planning, while privately expressing hatred for the daughter whose sacrifice made his success possible. The investigation I conducted into my family's social dynamics during those 6 years revealed the full scope of my father's public campaign to portray me as selfish and unhelpful, while positioning himself as a financially successful retiree who had managed his resources wisely and independently. I discovered through conversations with relatives that Richard had been telling extended family members that I was too selfish to help with anything, and completely focused on my own needs, while never contributing to family financial obligations or supporting my parents during their retirement transition. "Your father mentioned that you've never offered to help with their expenses," my Aunt Sarah had said during a recent family gathering, clearly influenced by Richard's narrative about my supposed selfishness. "He says you make good money, but never think about helping family members who might be struggling." The revelation that my father had been actively damaging my reputation with family members while benefiting from my secret financial support was almost as devastating as overhearing his true feelings about my existence. He had been systematically destroying my standing within our extended family, while never suspecting that his ability to maintain his pride and lifestyle depended entirely on my anonymous generosity. My cousin Michael had made similar comments during recent family events, suggesting that my parents were disappointed in my lack of family support and my apparent selfishness about sharing my professional success with relatives who needed assistance. "Uncle Richard seems frustrated that you don't contribute more to family needs," Michael had said during a holiday gathering held in the home I was secretly paying for. "He says you live pretty modestly for someone with your income, but you never seem to have money available to help with family expenses or emergencies." The irony of these conversations taking place in a house that existed in their family because of my financial sacrifice was so profound that I had struggled to respond appropriately without revealing the truth about my secret support or expressing the anger and hurt that my father's lies had created. But perhaps the most painful discovery was learning that my father had been positioning my apparent lack of generosity as evidence of character flaws and poor family values that proved I was exactly the disappointment and waste of space that he privately believed me to be. The mortgage documents I reviewed revealed another devastating irony that would soon become crucial to my response to this betrayal. Because I had been making the mortgage payments from my personal account for 6 years, and because the original mortgage had been structured to allow payment by third parties, I had inadvertently been building equity in the property that belonged to me rather than to my father. The legal reality of my situation was that I had become the effective owner of a house worth approximately $950,000. While my father lived there as an unknowing dependent who believed he owned property that was actually being supported entirely by my financial contributions and legal mortgage responsibility. Working with a real estate attorney to understand my legal position, I learned that my 6 years of mortgage payments had created ownership rights that were completely separate from my father's residential rights, and that I had the legal authority to sell the property regardless of his wishes or knowledge about my financial role. Ms. Gibson, your consistent mortgage payments have created substantial legal interest in this property, Attorney Patricia Williams explained during my consultation about property rights and real estate law. While your father may have believed he owned the house, your financial investment and mortgage responsibility have created ownership rights that give you significant control over the property's future. The legal framework that would allow me to sell the house that I had been secretly paying for was both complex and comprehensive, requiring careful documentation of my financial contributions while ensuring that all property transfer procedures complied with real estate law and mortgage regulations. But more than the legal technicalities, I was facing the fundamental decision about whether to continue enabling and supporting someone who despised my existence while publicly portraying me as selfish and disappointing, or whether to allow my father to experience the reality of his financial situation without my anonymous intervention. The emotional impact of overhearing my father's true feelings had been devastating, but it had also been liberating in a way that I hadn't expected. For the first time in 6 years, I was free from the obligation to preserve his dignity and pride, because I now understood that his comfortable lifestyle had been built on the sacrifice of someone he wished had never been born. The decision I was facing wasn't just about money or property rights. It was about self-respect, personal worth, and the fundamental question of whether I should continue sacrificing my own financial security and happiness to support someone who viewed me as worthless while taking credit for the success that my sacrifice had made possible. Have you ever realized that your anonymous generosity was enabling someone who despised you to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford while publicly portraying you as selfish and disappointing? That's exactly what I was confronting as I prepared to show my father what his life would look like without the support of the daughter he wished didn't exist. The beautiful home where he hosted family gatherings and accepted praise for his financial management was about to teach him some very expensive lessons about gratitude and the true meaning of family support. My decision to end 6 years of anonymous sacrifice and teach my father about the reality of his financial situation was driven not by revenge or anger, but by the liberating understanding that I had been enabling someone who despised me while damaging my own financial future and emotional well-being to preserve the comfort of someone who wished I had never existed. The clarity that came from overhearing my father's true feelings was both painful and empowering, because it freed me from the obligation to continue sacrificing my own happiness and security for someone who viewed my existence as a disappointment and waste of space, while never suspecting that his comfortable lifestyle depended entirely on my love and generosity. Working with real estate professionals and legal experts, I began the process of selling the house that I had been secretly supporting, ensuring that all property transfer procedures were properly documented while protecting my legal rights as the person who had been financially responsible for the mortgage payments and property maintenance. The house was worth approximately $950,000 in the current market, representing substantial equity that had been built through my 6 years of mortgage payments combined with natural property appreciation in their desirable suburban neighborhood. The sale would not only recover my $300 to $400 in mortgage payments, but would also provide additional profit that reflected the true value of my unwitting real estate investment. This property should sell quickly in the current market, explained real estate agent Jennifer Martinez during our listing consultation. The location is excellent, the house is well maintained, and properties in this price range are in high demand from buyers who want move-in ready homes in established neighborhoods. The irony that my father's pride in his home's condition and market value was actually pride in my financial investment and maintenance support wasn't lost on me as I prepared marketing materials that would attract qualified buyers who could appreciate the property's true worth and potential. But selling the house was only part of my comprehensive plan to create a new life free from family members who had taken my sacrifice for granted while expressing hatred for my existence. I had also begun planning a complete relocation that would allow me to start fresh in a new city where my professional skills were valued and my personal worth wasn't constantly undermined by people who viewed me as a disappointment. The software engineering position I had accepted in Seattle offered not only a substantial salary increase, but also the opportunity to work with cutting-edge technology projects that would advance my career in ways that had been impossible while I was dedicating so much of my income and emotional energy to preserving my father's comfort and dignity. The timing of my job transition would coincide perfectly with the house sale, allowing me to complete my escape from family relationships that had been built on my sacrifice and their unacknowledged dependence, while they publicly portrayed me as selfish and unhelpful in order to maintain their own pride and social standing. My preparation for this transition included closing all local bank accounts, canceling services and subscriptions tied to my current address, and ensuring that my family would have no way to contact me or track my location once I disappeared from their lives as completely as my father apparently wished I would. The new identity I was creating in Seattle would be built on my own achievements and professional success rather than on anonymous sacrifice for people who despised me while benefiting from my generosity. For the first time in my adult life, I would be living for myself rather than secretly supporting family members who wished I had never been born. The house listing went active on a Tuesday morning, with professional photographs that showcased the beautiful home my father had been hosting family gatherings in, while never suspecting that his daughter was the financial foundation for his pride and security. The marketing materials emphasized the property's excellent condition, desirable location, and move-in ready status that would appeal to buyers looking for immediate occupancy. Within 48 hours of listing, we had received multiple offers from qualified buyers who were attracted to the property's value and condition. The competitive bidding process ultimately resulted in a final sale price of $967,000, representing both recovery of my mortgage payments and substantial additional profit from my unwitting real estate investment. The closing process was scheduled for the following week, giving me exactly enough time to finalize my own transition to Seattle, while ensuring that my father would discover his changed circumstances only after the property transfer was complete and irreversible. My last week in town was spent completing the administrative details of my disappearance from my family's lives, including establishing mail forwarding to a P.O. box that would prevent any tracking of my new location while ensuring that important documents and legal notifications reached me during the transition period. The systematic elimination of every connection between my old life and my new beginning was both emotionally difficult and profoundly liberating, representing the end of 6 years of secret sacrifice for people who had never appreciated my generosity while publicly portraying me as selfish and disappointing. My final action before leaving town was to ensure that my father would understand exactly what he had lost when he discovered that his worthless disappointment daughter had been his anonymous savior for 6 years, and that his cruel words about wishing I had never existed were about to become his reality in ways he had never imagined possible. The letter I left for him would be delivered by the closing attorney along with the legal documentation of the property sale, ensuring that Richard would learn about my financial sacrifice at the same moment he discovered that his comfortable retirement lifestyle was ending forever. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to grant someone's wish that you had never existed, by actually disappearing from their life after years of secret support? That's exactly what I was about to experience as my father learned that his anonymous financial savior was the daughter he despised, and that his wishes about my existence were about to be fulfilled in the most expensive way possible. The beautiful home where he had accepted praise for his financial management was about to be sold by the daughter he had never suspected was its true financial foundation. The execution of my plan to sell my father's house and disappear from his life unfolded with perfect timing and devastating effectiveness. As Richard discovered the truth about my 6 years of secret financial support, at the same moment he learned that his comfortable retirement lifestyle was ending forever, due to his own cruel assessment of my worth and existence. The house closing took place on a Friday morning, with all legal documentation processed efficiently, while Richard remained completely unaware that his home was being transferred to new owners who would take possession within 48 hours. The $967,000 sale price represented both recovery of my mortgage payments and substantial profit from the property appreciation that my financial investment had supported. My own departure from town had been carefully coordinated to occur immediately after the closing, ensuring that I would be safely established in Seattle before my father discovered his changed circumstances and realized that his worthless disappointment daughter had been the anonymous foundation for his pride and security. The letter I had prepared for Richard would be delivered by the closing attorney, along with the legal documentation that would explain how his mortgage had actually been managed for the past 6 years and why his house was now being sold by someone he had never suspected owned it. "Dear Dad," the letter began, "by the time you read this, the house you've been living in for the past 6 years has been sold, and I have relocated to a new city where I can build a life free from family members who view my existence as a disappointment and waste of space." The explanation continued with a detailed accounting of my financial sacrifice and the legal mechanisms that had allowed me to secretly support his lifestyle while building equity in property that he believed he owned independently. For 6 years, I have been making the $4,200 monthly mortgage payments on this house, totaling $300 to $400 of my own money that I spent to preserve your dignity and comfort during your retirement. You never knew about my sacrifice because I arranged for the payments to be processed anonymously while you received correspondence that made it appear your mortgage was being managed through your pension. The letter included copies of all mortgage payment records, bank statements, and legal documentation that proved my financial responsibility for the property, while demonstrating that Richard's comfortable lifestyle had existed entirely because of my anonymous generosity and love. While I was working overtime and living in a small apartment to afford your mortgage payments, you were hosting family gatherings in this beautiful home and accepting praise for your wise financial management and successful retirement planning. You never suspected that your daughter was sacrificing her own financial goals to ensure your security and happiness. But the most devastating section of the letter revealed that I had overheard his true feelings about my existence and his wishes that I had never been born into his family. However, I recently learned how you truly feel about me when I accidentally overheard you tell Mom that I am absolutely worthless and a complete disappointment who you wish had never existed. You called me a waste of space while sitting in the home that exists because of my sacrifice, and you told family members that I'm selfish and never help with anything while I was spending $50,400 annually to preserve your lifestyle. The final section of the letter granted Richard's wish about my existence, while explaining the consequences of his cruel assessment of the daughter who had been his anonymous savior. Since you wish I had never existed, I am granting that wish by disappearing from your life completely. You will never see me again, never hear from me again, and never benefit from my support again. The house has been sold, and you have 2 days to find new housing arrangements that reflect your actual financial situation rather than the lifestyle my sacrifice made possible. The letter concluded with my permanent farewell and the revelation that his comfortable retirement had been entirely dependent on the daughter he despised. You now have the opportunity to experience life without the daughter you wish had never been born. I hope you find it exactly as fulfilling as you expected it would be. You will never hear from me again. Tracy. On Monday morning, while I was settling into my new apartment in Seattle and beginning my first day at my new job, Richard received the letter and legal documentation that would transform his understanding of the past 6 years and reveal the devastating consequences of his cruel words about the daughter who had secretly preserved his dignity and security. The phone calls that followed my disappearance created a family crisis that exposed the full scope of my parents' dependence on the daughter they had viewed as worthless, while simultaneously revealing to extended family members how wrong they had been about my supposed selfishness and lack of family support. My Uncle Tom called my disconnected phone number repeatedly, before reaching out to other family members who were equally unable to locate me or understand why I had suddenly vanished without explanation or forwarding address. "Has anyone heard from Tracy?" Tom asked during family phone calls that revealed growing panic about my disappearance. "Richard says she sold his house and disappeared, but that doesn't make any sense. How could Tracy sell Richard's house?" The confusion among family members who had believed my father's lies about my selfishness gradually gave way to understanding as the truth about my 6 years of secret financial support became apparent through the legal documentation I had left behind. My Aunt Sarah was the first to understand the true scope of what had happened and the devastating irony of my father's situation. "Oh my God," Sarah said when she finally processed the mortgage payment records and property transfer documents. "Tracy has been paying Richard's mortgage for 6 years. She's been secretly supporting them this whole time while Richard was telling everyone she was selfish and never helped with anything." The revelation that I had been spending over $50,000 annually to preserve my father's comfortable lifestyle, while he publicly portrayed me as disappointing and unhelpful, created a family crisis that extended far beyond just my disappearance to include fundamental questions about character, gratitude, and the consequences of taking family sacrifice for granted. My cousin Michael expressed the shame and regret that many family members were feeling as they realized how completely they had misjudged my character and contributions based on my father's false narrative about my supposed selfishness. "We all believed Richard when he said Tracy was selfish and never helped," Michael admitted during family discussions about my disappearance. "But she was secretly paying for their house the entire time while living in that tiny apartment. We were so wrong about her. And now she's gone forever because of how we treated her." But perhaps the most devastating consequence of my disappearance was Richard's own realization that his cruel words about wishing I had never existed had been spoken in the home that existed only because of my love and sacrifice, and that his comfortable retirement had been entirely dependent on the daughter he had viewed as worthless. Have you ever granted someone's wish that you didn't exist by actually disappearing from their life after years of secret support? That's exactly what Richard was experiencing as he faced homelessness and the shocking realization that his waste of space daughter had been his anonymous savior, while I began building a new life in Seattle, free from family members who had taken my sacrifice for granted. My father's wish that I had never existed was about to be fulfilled in ways that would teach him the true value of the daughter he had lost forever. The aftermath of my disappearance and the sale of my father's house created a family crisis that extended far beyond Richard's immediate homelessness to include fundamental changes in how extended family members viewed character, gratitude, and the devastating consequences of taking anonymous sacrifice for granted while expressing hatred for the person providing that support. Richard's initial reaction to discovering that his house had been sold by his worthless disappointment daughter was complete disbelief, followed by desperate attempts to contact me that were futile because I had systematically eliminated every possible way for my family to reach me or track my location after relocating to Seattle. The legal documentation I had left behind proved conclusively that I had been the true financial foundation for his comfortable retirement lifestyle. But the reality of his situation was so shocking that he initially refused to accept that his despised daughter had been his anonymous savior for 6 years. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Richard told family members who were helping him understand the mortgage payment records and property transfer documents. "Tracy doesn't have the money to pay a mortgage like this. She lives in that tiny apartment and never seems to have any extra money for anything. But the bank statements, payment records, and legal documentation were comprehensive and undeniable, proving that I had sacrificed over $300,000 of my own money to preserve his dignity and security, while he privately expressed contempt for my existence and publicly portrayed me as selfish and unhelpful. My Aunt Sarah was the family member who finally forced Richard to confront the reality of what he had lost through his cruel assessment of my worth and his expressed wishes that I had never been born. "Richard, you need to understand what Tracy did for you," Sarah said during a family meeting that addressed the crisis of his sudden homelessness. "She worked overtime and lived in a cramped apartment for 6 years so you could live comfortably in that beautiful house. She sacrificed her own financial goals to preserve your pride and dignity, and you repaid her sacrifice by telling everyone she was selfish and worthless. The revelation that my family sacrifice had been motivated by love and respect for his pride rather than obligation or guilt made Richard's cruel words about my existence even more devastating and unforgivable, because it demonstrated that he had been rejecting and despising the very qualities that had made me willing to sacrifice so much for his comfort. My mother Margaret was facing her own reckoning with the consequences of participating in the character assassination I had overheard, as family members questioned how she could have agreed with Richard's brutal assessment of a daughter who was secretly ensuring their financial security and comfortable lifestyle. "How could you call Tracy odd and mediocre when she was paying your mortgage?" my cousin Jennifer asked during one of the family discussions about my disappearance. "She was sacrificing her own money to keep you in that house, and you were both talking about how disappointed you were in her existence." The financial reality that Richard was now facing without my secret support was devastating and immediate, as he attempted to find housing that he could afford on his actual pension income, rather than the lifestyle that my mortgage payments had made possible. The apartments and housing options available within Richard's real budget were a shocking contrast to the beautiful suburban home where he had hosted family gatherings and accepted praise for his financial management, revealing how completely his comfortable retirement had depended on my anonymous generosity. "Everything I can afford is so small and depressing," Richard complained to family members who were helping him search for new housing. "I don't understand how this happened. I thought my pension was enough to cover my expenses, but apparently I was wrong about everything." The revelation that his pension had never been sufficient to support his lifestyle was particularly painful because it meant acknowledging that his comfortable retirement had been an illusion maintained entirely by the daughter he had wished out of existence. But perhaps the most devastating consequence of my disappearance was the damage to Richard's relationships with extended family members, who now understood how completely he had lied about my character, while benefiting from my sacrifice and generosity. Family members who had previously respected Richard's opinions and believed his narrative about my supposed selfishness were now questioning everything they thought they knew about family dynamics and character assessment. "I feel terrible about how we treated Tracy based on what Richard told us," my Uncle David admitted during family discussions about the situation. "We all believed she was selfish and didn't care about family, but she was secretly supporting them the entire time. Now she's gone forever, and it's our fault for believing lies about someone who was actually the most generous person in our family." The systematic destruction of my reputation that Richard had conducted among extended family members was now being reversed as people understood the truth about my character and sacrifice. But the reversal came too late to repair the damage he had caused or to restore the relationships that had been poisoned by his false narrative. Meanwhile, my new life in Seattle was flourishing in ways that validated every aspect of my decision to escape from family relationships that had been built on my sacrifice and their unacknowledged dependence while they portrayed me as disappointing and selfish. The software engineering position I had accepted was challenging and rewarding, allowing me to work on innovative projects with colleagues who valued my technical skills and professional contributions, rather than viewing my success as something that should be shared with family members who despised my existence. "Tracy, your work on the cloud security project has been exceptional," my new supervisor wrote in my first performance review. Your technical expertise and problem-solving abilities are exactly what we need for our advanced development initiatives. We're excited to have you on the team. The professional recognition and personal satisfaction I was experiencing in my new life was a stark contrast to the family relationships where my achievements had been dismissed and my existence had been viewed as disappointing and worthless. But perhaps the most liberating aspect of my new beginning was the financial freedom that came from no longer spending $50,400 annually to support someone who despised me, allowing me to invest in my own goals and happiness, rather than preserving the comfort of family members who wished I had never been born. The beautiful Seattle apartment I was able to afford with the money that had previously gone to my father's mortgage was a daily reminder that my financial sacrifice had been enabling people who never appreciated my generosity while publicly portraying me as selfish and unsuccessful. 6 months after my disappearance, Richard was living in a small senior housing facility that accepted residents based on limited pension income, while I was thriving in a career and lifestyle that reflected my actual abilities and worth, rather than my family's cruel assessment of my value. The family gatherings that had once been hosted in the home I secretly paid for were no longer possible, and extended family members were dealing with the permanent loss of relationships that had been poisoned by Richard's lies about my character and contributions. My decision to grant my father's wish that I had never existed had taught him the true value of the daughter he had lost, but it had taught me something even more important about self-worth, family relationships, and the liberation that comes from refusing to enable people who despise you while benefiting from your sacrifice. If you're secretly supporting family members who express contempt for your existence while taking credit for the success your sacrifice makes possible, please know that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect, rather than anonymous generosity that enables their cruelty and ingratitude. Have you ever provided secret support to family members who wished you didn't exist? How do you protect your own worth and happiness from relatives who take your sacrifice for granted while expressing hatred for your existence? Your experience might help others facing similar family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Remember that anonymous generosity to ungrateful recipients often enables their cruelty rather than earning their appreciation. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give to someone who wishes you didn't exist is the experience of life without your support. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.